I'm Lynn.
I'm Amanda.
And this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We're cutting through the fluff and cracking open what it really takes to build a business and life that you actually want.
No gurus, no gatekeeping, just real talk, big action, and the badass energy you need to scale and slay.
Some episodes, it's just us.
And sometimes we bring on powerful guests with stories that'll hit home.
Either way, this is not about playing small.
It's about going all in.
Let's get after it. Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. Today, we're going to retouch on a different way, something that we talk about a lot, which is training people how to treat us and setting up boundaries within your own business. This has come up a lot, and in different ways over the course of the last couple of weeks and months with our clients, with our clients' clients. So we wanted to talk about what this looks like and how it can affect and how you can change it in your business.
Yeah, I think this time we're going to focus more on like the team and the client aspect, because maybe before we've done a bit more broad, but I'll start with the client side, how a client is wanting you to answer the phone after hours or wanting to meet with you at all times or expecting you to bend over backwards for XYZ. And there is an aspect of we train others how to treat us, but even if we have trained them, are we holding them accountable? Are we like following through? And there's this dance that you play to, at the end of the day, if your clients are being jerks and assholes and expecting, like, how have you set them up in order to be able to push that onto you?
Absolutely. And I'm thinking of one particular client that I have recently who was just trying to be nice. And that was the reason that she's like, it all blew up because she was trying to be nice. Like, oh, well, she seemed like a nice person. So I just wanted to throw this thing in extra to be nice, not clarifying that it was an extra. And so then the client was upset when she didn't do that the second time and the third time. And then it became this spiraling out of control. Well, and now I'm not getting what I paid for because she thought, because you were being nice and seriously over-delivering, something that was going to be the case forever. And the reason she was over-delivering was because she was kind of slow on clients at the time. She's like, well, I had the time to do more. And I'm like, okay, but now you've set your client up to think that you're going to be doing, as a social media manager, you're going to do 2 posts a day every day. And they think that's part of the package, but they're only paying for a week. And so you did that because you were being nice and because you had a lower client load, but now you have a better client load. So now you don't have the time. So you're doing what's on the contract, but the client doesn't know that. And so then they went off the rails. And now they think that there's this huge problem and that they're not getting what they paid for when really they were getting quadruple what they were paying for in the beginning. And so a lot of times it comes from the best intentions. Like you don't even realize it's happening. You're just trying to be nice. And then suddenly it's an issue. Like, she was a friend of a friend. So she had my phone number, my personal phone number. And so she would start calling and asking for progress. And it wasn't that big of a deal. And then it became a big deal. And so setting those boundaries, and then it became much harder to pull away and to pull back in a way that was still professional and amicable once they hit that point where shit had hit the fan.
Yeah. Listen, I've been in that position many times and gotten burned because I would give and give and give as a consultant, as when I owned my security company, and definitely got bit a few times. And I think, we're training them to think that that's the norm. And so I have to watch myself because I just recently because I don't take on too many clients, but I brought on somebody who's a friend and I had this conversation with them, but even having the conversation with them, but because there's a hard line on essentially where we need to get kind of everything in order before this happens, I've been doing a lot more time, but I had to pull myself back and say, hey, this is how much you get per the contract, but I'm front loading a lot of things because of XYZ. And I have to make that known because I've been bit so many times, and it is a giver mentality in some aspects, but also it could come from several different ways. And so not having boundaries, it might be in your contract that your client gets X amount of access to you, but the second you start answering calls or doing things outside of that contractual agreement, they feel like that is the norm and not the contract. I have a client who's lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it wasn't just necessarily them, it was their team members that kind of allowed some of the boundaries to be broken or stretched, we'll say, and the client demanded all this money back because of X and Y and because of Z. And so, listen, we have to first make the boundaries clear. And this is with teams or with clients. We'll get to teams in a second, but then we have to make sure that we're holding them accountable. There's subtle ways and there is in your face ways. And I think this is, for this podcast, we're going after the fact, right? So they're already breaking it. So how can you kind of reposition yourself? First is to remind them of the agreement. And that could be in a simple email and a text. Then it could be in a subtle way of like having your business hours at the bottom of your signature, only answering questions or messages during those certain times, having it on your voicemail. If this is urgent and this is what an emergency is, sending out an email or a text to say, this is what constitutes as an emergency. This is what a non-emergency, to like spell it out, and not in a pointing the finger aggressive way, but you can be as subtle or as aggressive, but shame on you if you've allowed them to break it. So first it's on you to reprogram them. And I always, when I have clients, it's easier when I direct clients to do it versus myself, but I always err on the side of really, 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 really strictness, like to the point of like there's no wiggle room when you're reprogramming people into the boundaries. But then you have to be careful to not get back into the same position that you are once you start kind of loosening the reins a little bit. Yeah. And that constant communication of not allowing them to break. And sometimes you have to have meetings. Sometimes you need to put new things into place because it's a need. Now they're used to that. And sometimes you're going to lose people because even if the contract said different, you set up new expectations that it was going to be like this, and now it's not. And so they're not going to be able to come back from that, which means bad reviews and different things like that as well.
And I think it's really important that you also develop some scripts around it too. Like, what are you going to say, and have it already practiced, have it already run down in your brain. Because I think a lot of times when we fall back on our old patterns, or when we like try to be nice, is when we don't know what to say, when there's a bit of confrontation there. And I'll give a pretty easy example of retail sales. Somebody asks for an exception on a policy, oh, this return policy, or oh, I was sick, or oh, I was this, or, you know, it's the day after my birthday, but this, and this. Like, there's always going to be a reason why a client wants to break a policy. As a business owner, you can absolutely choose to break the policy and do whatever you want to do, but you're setting up that example for your entire team. So like if you as the owner decide, or as the manager decide to break a policy, then it sets a precedent. It's like a legal precedent where someone's like, oh, well, so-and-so last week, you gave them a discount on this, or like, oh, well, you gave this person an extension. You did this for this person. You think it's never going to come back around, but it often will. So getting yourself used to saying the policy, like, what is the policy? Know the policy. If you don't know the policy, that's part of the problem right there. But know the policy and know what you're going to say, and have those confrontational mirror speeches with yourself if you need to. Like, I like to have it as almost an SOP for your team members as well. Like, this is what we say. If somebody calls and they want a refund, if somebody calls and they're complaining about damage to a shipment, this is what we say. This is our policy around this. And make sure it's drilled home, because a lot of times some of that disconnect happens just because you're not 100% sure what to say. You don't know what the rules are. You don't know where the wiggle room is. You don't know what your responsibilities are either to the client or to the company. And so it trickles down in weird ways. And so I think that's one of the easiest things you can do right away to help yourself get over these in this boundary setting way, is to make an SOP around it. Think about some scripts and practice them. Practice what you're going to say. Practice what you're going to say about your business hours. Practice what you're going to say when you're in the heat of the moment. You have that emotion. It can cloud your judgment. It can cloud what you say. So if you know what your script is, it'll come off much easier, and it will eventually help you set that boundary easier and clearer.
Yeah. Not only like cloud, but also like, if they can sometimes smell fear or the wobble, then they're not going to take you as serious. When you were talking, I was actually thinking of also external things that you can do, kind of like what I said, like put it on your email, put it on your voice. So it's not actually you, but I was thinking, I know we always go back to fitness, but how some of my classes, like the Pilates or the yoga classes, because they actually shut the door versus grid, they'll actually shut the door. There's a sign on it, do not interrupt. And there's usually people waiting outside to fill seats. So at a certain time, if the seats aren't full, they put people in. So if somebody comes in and tries to look in because it's numbered, their seat's already full. So that's another way of training them of like, hey, we're not going to like allow you to be late, show up when you need to show up type of thing. So what are even some nonverbal cues you can do to help enhance the retraining and reprogramming of that for you and for them? And so thinking of it like from a holistic lens. So let's talk about the team, your VAs, your employees, your contractors, and how maybe they're not living up to the standards. They're not doing the things that you need. Recently, I've had this conversation with a team. The people aren't showing up to the team meetings. No, they're top producers, but they're not showing up to the team meetings because it was never a thing that was expected of them. It wasn't, you know, it's kind of loosey goosey. And it's interesting because with this particular dynamic, it's the top producers aren't. So how can you reframe that? Why is it important to be in the team? Why is it important for them to show up to these meetings? So it's reprogramming everybody to say, hey, we're a collective. This is how we operate. This is our core values. This is our vision. This is our mission. And this is what we're doing. So it's having to re-get their buy-in. It's having to remind them of like, hey, you are a top producer, so you have great influence on the others. Like just you being in the meetings and not from an ego standpoint of view could add value to everybody. We want to be more collaborative. We want to do this. We want to do that. And so it's an interesting dynamic, but how to re-engage them, it's having a conversation with them first and realigning them with the culture and the values and the direction in which your business is going. I know you've dealt with this a lot with contractors as well.
Absolutely. When it comes to contractors specifically, it's a lot of like, oh, what am I legally allowed to have them do? How can I enforce this rule or this cultural part of my company on a contractor who may not be legally required to be there? And there are still ways you can subtly make it seem, I mean, you can subtly or not so subtly tell people this is an expectation, that if you want to be a contractor, then this is the expectation that we have in the company, that this is what you need to have. Otherwise, we're going to go with a different contractor. There's more wiggle room than you think when it comes to an employee versus a contractor versus, you know, all sorts of different types of under the table. There's different types of employment that you might have, and there are different rules and regulations depending on what state you're in, what country you're in. So there are some rules that have to be followed. And that doesn't mean you can't still have an expectation of what everybody who's involved in your company should and should not be doing. That's just across the board. You can always choose to hire somebody else. You can always choose to get a different contractor, a different company to assist you. So, you know, it goes back to some extent, our podcast on integrity. What's your company stand for? What is it you're trying to have as your policy, as your integrity, as your vision, as your mission? Everybody you hire can be part of that. Does this person fit into that dynamic? And then when you are setting up expectations and boundaries and telling people what to do and what not to do, that can come into play there. And I know that it can feel harder with an independent contractor or with remote employees or anybody who's maybe not there 24/7, or even that one employee that we all have or have had. It's just a little bit harder to deal with. But in the end, it really is your responsibility as the owner, as the leader, to set those boundaries and to hold the line.
100%.
You've got to hold the line.
And I think with team members, regardless, independent contractors, a partner, employees, VAs, nipping it quick and fast, because a lot of times we get the golden handcuff syndrome, right? And where we feel like, oh, we can't correct them because they are a star person for XYZ. I'm thinking of some personal shit that has just been happening. And at the end of the day, no, we all are on the same playing field, more or less. And so we train others how to treat us. We train others how to show up in our business, especially when it's our business and even when it's not our business. And how we hold those accountable is super important. So how to reprogram or redirect them is almost the same way that you do with clients. Is first you have to acknowledge, but with the team, it's more so a buy-in because they're a part of the team, versus a client isn't necessarily a buy-in, kind of is, but in a different way. And that buy-in can look very different, but it's getting them to buy back into the values. So the reason why that they're there, the culture, the direction in which the business is going. And then the coming up with terms of like, hey, this is like the expectations. And sometimes that can be collaborative with the team members and sometimes not, but this is how we're going to move forward. But then the boundary and the expectations, once those are set, there's no leeway, especially if they are a problem child. Let them work themselves out or let them build themselves up. But sometimes a conversation has to be had if they're more of a problem child, or if they're having a hard time of like, what's the 1, 2, 3 to get there? There is a little bit of grace that you have to have with that expectations sometimes. And sometimes it's not. Like, bad behavior is bad behavior, and that shouldn't be tolerated. And it's nipped. I kind of go back to like the parents who threaten and threaten and threaten, but don't do anything. And listen, I was there. I did that. Sometimes OT would get on me about that. And like, I remember like breaking that habit of, if you don't do this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, knowing damn well that it doesn't happen. So don't be that type of leader either. If you're going to say it, be about it. Like, do the thing. That is really important. And then having obviously the HR side of like, are they written up? Are they this? Are they that? Like, that structure really can help you stay in integrity with retraining and keeping them accountable to that standard, that level.
Yes, I think that is something a lot of people miss, particularly if you have no HR part of your company.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a company that's big enough that you have a separate HR department, then great. But a lot of business owners, and I would say for sure, obviously solopreneurs, or even if you're the owner, but you have just a few independent contractors under you versus having employees or departments, you are the HR. So you've got to have a system in place, because the last thing you really want is that feeling of like, oh, they were blindsided by being fired, or I don't know how to, like, at what point do I fire them? That should be pretty easy to understand if you have a system in place, like this 3 strikes you're out, or this infraction, this. There should be almost a mathematical equation of whether or not you're firing somebody or they're about to get fired. It shouldn't be a surprise, like, oh, should I fire them or not? Like, well, okay, well, have they done what they said? Have they met these checks? When you did your evaluation, did they fall in line with the expectations that you had set for them? And then you come to realize that nobody has any expectations. Everybody's just kind of like winging it. And that's where it really gets into trouble, is that you don't have foundational system in place to make those decisions for you, to make it easier for you to run your business. So I think the HR side is what a lot of businesses forget about, because, well, it kind of sucks to have to do it.
Yeah.
It sucks. Like, nobody wants to do all the things, but it will help you with a lot of that headache later.
Absolutely.
That's what a system does.
Absolutely. Listen, shame on us first. And I'm a big advocate of that, especially when it comes to stuff like this. We're the ones who allowed it to get to this point. And so it's taking responsibility, looking at where, regardless if it's team, clients, whatever, and where do we want to go? Where do we want to be? And mapping out that pathway so we can retrain them, so we can redirect them into the direction in which we want to go. And that takes time. That takes programming. If you've been allowing them to walk all over you for the past 5 years, don't think just because you set a boundary and communicate it in one team meeting that they're going to stop doing that in 5 minutes, in 5 days. No, it's going to take a little bit of time. You're going to have to like continue to sometimes remind them up to a certain point, and then they're not taking responsibility. Sometimes it's hard to break those patterns, but you have to set that pathway and then hold them accountable and hold yourself accountable to not allow them to slip is important, because having a team that's flowing in the right direction, having clients that understand the boundaries, it both breed for a better business, a happier engagement amongst all, better results, better ROI. So why wouldn't you want to set those expectations, hold people accountable, and have that ideal work, life, client, team kind of harmony?
Absolutely. But ultimately, you got to do the work. You got to put in the action.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always work to be done. Don't be overwhelmed. Pick one, focus on it for a month, a few weeks, a couple of months, then pick another. Like, they'll eventually compound.
Yep. Doesn't get easier. You just get better at doing all the crap.
Yeah.
There's always something to be done.
Always.
Joys of entrepreneurship.
The joys of life and evolution. I think it's everything. Like, we don't stay stagnant, period. For those of you that are wanting to stay stagnant, I don't think you'd be listening to this podcast. So that's facts. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. Go ahead and share it with somebody who you feel needs to kind of maybe like take a look at their boundaries and how to repivot or redirect their clients and or their team members into showing up the way that they want them to and not having all these expectations that shouldn't be there. Again, shame on us. We train them how to treat us. So now we just have to reprogram them. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that way you are in the know of all the podcasts. We release them every week on a Tuesday. We love our podcast. Let us also know if there's a topic that you want to hear about that's burning in you or that you want us to dive deeper into. We love to hear from our audience. Go ahead and leave it in the comments below.
All right. Until next time.
Get after it. Thanks for tuning in. But remember, listening is not doing.
Take what you heard today and move.
Share the episode, leave us a review, and tag us when you take action.
Head over to the pursuitofbadasserie.com and see how we're helping entrepreneurs get results without the fluff.
Until next time,
let's get after it.